ready. Well, hi, good morning, everyone. I'm Mary Piasta. I'm an attorney here in Sonoma, and I'm here with Beth Merrill. And I want to give you a little background about myself, my firm, and Beth, and then we'll get into the nitty-gritty of what we're going to talk about today. So basically, I have a practice here on the plaza. My clients are in different areas as well. And I help individuals, their families, and businesses tackle thorny issues and, get them peace of mind. And today, what I want to talk to you about are a really invaluable resource, and those are professional fiduciaries. And professional fiduciaries can help with your personal affairs, your loved ones, and also your estate administration. And critical to this discussion is my law firm analyst, who also doubles as a professional fiduciary, Beth Merrill, and she's here with us today. So what I want to do is organize this talk in 3 parts. The first thing we want to do is kind of talk about the basics of an estate plan to set the stage for why, we all get fiduciaries involved in estates. And then we want to talk about a discussion about fiduciaries and who they are and how they can, help certain situations, and then talk about them as a solution. And of course, we will have time for questions and answers at the end if you have any. I know that one of the participants already mentioned having some experience in estate handling recently and has been to a presentation on this type of topic too. So, launching into it first, Beth, should we talk about estate plans?
Yeah, I think it would be really helpful, Mary, if you just reviewed the basics of an estate plan, because I know most people are familiar with the living trust, but there's a lot more to it than that.
Right, for sure. So a basic estate plan has 4 parts. It's legal documents that provide security over the decisions that folks want to have. So we talk about it in terms of a living trust, a will, powers of attorney, and healthcare directives.
Now, is that a traditional kind of a will that people used to sit around and wait for their relatives to read off to find out what they had, or is it a different kind of a will these days?
Right. So here in California, there is the traditional type of will, but what I'm talking about is something different. It's called a pour-over will. And what it does is it works in conjunction with your trust to make sure that your estate goes into your trust and is handled how you want, not how someone else wants or what basic California law provides.
And it also helps to prevent probate, because if you just only have a will, it goes through probate. And if you have no will, it goes through probate. So this pour-over will is really a specialty document that works well with the living trust.
It does. That's a really great way to do it. And the reason people don't like probate can be great for certain situations, but most of the time folks want to avoid that process because it's expensive and it takes time. And so why pay lawyers percentages of your estate when you can give it to the people or organizations you want?
And in fact, probate, it's statutory fees. So even if you have a great, reasonably priced attorney, they're mandated to charge certain fees. So it's kind of not even discretionary. So it can be expensive. So I think a good estate plan, you mentioned the living trust, the pour-over will. Are there other documents that people should really be paying more attention to?
I think so. And I think this goes into the main meat of our conversation today, which is those documents that you need in effect during your life. If for whatever reason you can't make decisions for yourself, there are documents that allow a trusted person to do that for you for both your finances and also healthcare. Those are a power of attorney and a healthcare directive.
So Mary, what exactly is a power of attorney for healthcare and a power of attorney for business and finance?
Right. So the power of attorney for healthcare is a document that gives someone other than yourself the ability to make healthcare decisions for you that you've already stated you want to have happen. And that's just in the uncertain or unlikely event that you can't make those decisions for yourself. The one for finance is kind of the same type of thing, except instead of talking to the ER physicians, it allows someone to make decisions for you on behalf of your finances or your businesses. I have clients who really use it with their real estate holdings.
Well, that sounds kind of high level, but what
Yeah.
about the day-to-day? What would somebody
Right.
with the power of finance be able to do to help your client?
Right. So the day-to-day would be, if you're unable to manage that stack of bills, the power of attorney for finance could come in, literally go through your stack, get your checkbook, write checks on your behalf, go to your bank and communicate, make sure that your bills are paid. So, I mean, that's the basics of it.
And could they help gather all your tax information together to help you get your taxes done every year?
Any of those decisions. And, I have clients who, they decide to actually let people do this for them. It's sort of like hiring a personal assistant, and they let them manage their affairs for them, even when, they could do it themselves. But the agent can do all those things.
So, for instance, I like to eat food. I don't necessarily like to cook it.
Right.
So, it's kind of like, even though I could, I have the option to have somebody else handle this piece of my life and free up my time and my worry and concern.
Exactly. So the lawyer's job in this is to make sure that, that the principal, the client, is fully advised of all the different options, and that if they do want to have this legal document in effect to let someone else manage their things, then that document is crafted. The client's big decision is, who will that person be? And Lori, since you are a fiduciary.
Well, yes, but before we go there, Mary, I just want to know what the options are for when these documents would come into play, this power of attorney for healthcare. Is it just when somebody's in a coma and they're about to pull the plug?
Yeah.
Is it when somebody's facing bankruptcy, or is it well before that? So when do they come in right away, or when somebody loses capacity?
Yeah, it's an important distinction, and it can be either. It depends on the specific document, and there are best practices and options for clients. So it can either come into effect when someone is determined to be incapacitated, or if it's a different type called a durable power of attorney, then it comes into effect immediately. And, there are lots of reasons for folks to talk to their lawyers about those in general, because the situations where someone might need an immediate decision to be made or something to be acted on, like a mortgage payment or communicating with doctors, the immediate type of document is worthy of consideration for sure.
So then so what would you recommend then?
Yeah, it really depends on the person and their life and their family. But I think, so it's a case by case basis, but you've got to have a trusted person. It's got to be, if that person is a family member or a friend, whomever it is fine. But it really depends on the size of the estate and the needs of that particular client and their family situation. I've seen a lot of different solutions for this, and they range from hiring professionals as an option to having their best friend neighbor step in. So really it depends. But
it sounds like, because we don't know what the emergencies are going to be, but we can plan for emergencies. It seems like what I'm hearing is that it might be better to take effect immediately, even if the person doesn't need the services of a fiduciary or somebody, an agent, a durable power of attorney for healthcare or finance, because that way there's no time lost, and maybe having the doctors have to run tests, or family members, who are fighting, have their opinions. So, even though the person could act immediately, they wouldn't act immediately unless they were invited to, and it was absolutely appropriate in the certain circumstances.
Yeah, I think in general, the immediate type of acting document provides more options for the client, for sure. And in situations, it's important because if you don't do it immediately, then your wishes could be jeopardized, right? So that stack of bills that needs to be paid, all those things.
Right.
So really, having a durable power of attorney is, again, worthy of consideration for certain clients' wishes, for sure.
Okay, so yeah, because there just might not be enough time to the doctor to declare somebody incompetent so that their agent could take over and make a very important medical or financial decision for them.
Exactly.
You don't want to waste that precious time because you don't know what emergencies could befall you.
Well, and exactly. And, I have seen various client situations, and depending on the client, again, like retired doctors, they have very specific medical protocols that they want followed. And having that lapse in time would mean for that client, their choices and decisions wouldn't necessarily be followed. So the solution for that is a legal document that gives someone power for an appropriate time, but without having to go through the hurdle of incapacity.
Gotcha.
So, now that, we've set the stage about estate plans and these legal documents, I want to kind of shift our conversation to talking about, fiduciaries and folks who could be named on the document. And Lori Beth, as a professional fiduciary, what are your thoughts about who should be named on, or what would be important to consider with being named on a document?
Well, some people, for consistency, they might consider naming one person on all the documents, or you can name a different person on each document. And so, but it is whoever you do name on the document, it's very advisable that you ensure all the people can work together, because a lot of the duties, do overlap. So there's really going to be a high sense of trust and communication amongst this group of people if you determine you want to name different people on your documents, or the same people.
Well, and what do you see with folks, like, in your prior experience with the Council on Aging, is it that most people name family members or friends? Like, what did you see come through there?
Well, I've seen it both. When I did work for Council on Aging, obviously they would name Council on Aging as a professional fiduciary. But a lot of people would name a family member. But, Mary, there's a lot of pros and cons to naming a family member. Mistakenly, people think, well, I'm leaving them something in my trust or my will, so they should be willing to do this for free. The problem with that is it becomes an overwhelming full-time job that most people are not just prepared to just stop their life and give it all the detail and attention, and you don't know what you don't know. So unfortunately, because the learning curve is so steep, well-meaning intentioned relatives and friends can miss a lot of the timing, a lot of the legal requirements that need to be made. Just because you're not in probate doesn't mean that you're not subject to probate code and all the timing issues and distribution and accounting requirements of that. So, the problem is that sometimes we'll name people, and in this society where we're no longer like all working on the farm, most people live far away. Yeah. And so there's time changes even, which can affect trying to administer an estate or make medical decisions or financial decisions. So and they're pretty busy. We're all living a pretty busy life. They're not experienced enough is a real pitfall. And it would cause problems sometimes if you name one sibling over another sibling. There's just this natural hardwired sibling rivalry. Right. And so, it can really cause problems within the family by naming a family member, and due to the lack of experience of the family member, the savings that you would get by them doing it for free quickly get eaten up, because they're going to be advising quite a bit with attorneys. And it's going to cause delays as well.
Right, and I think as you mentioned, those delays they can jeopardize folks' overall wishes. So let's talk about, the meat of the talk here. And we had another presentation about a month back with Vintage House. We talked about the Netflix movie, I Care a Lot. And there's this whole concept of, quote, fiduciaries. So can you, as a fiduciary, can you explain in this context what a fiduciary is?
Right. And I can't tell you, many people have approached me, Mary, and said, oh my gosh, that's a nightmare scenario.
Mm-hmm.
What about that movie, I Care a Lot? And I want to allay everybody's fears that luckily in California and Arizona are the only two states in the union that require licensing for fiduciaries. Yeah. So we have a lot of built-in safeguards because of the licensing.
Wait, hold on. But in California, so because they're licensed, then fiduciaries were set up by who? It's the legislature, or we're talking about?
Yes, the California legislature, right. Under the Business and Professions Code, starting in 6500 and specifically in 6501, it clearly delineates what a fiduciary is and what capacities they can serve. So that way we're very clear about not overstepping boundaries and what services we can provide for you. So they define it, and it's not so glamorous and exciting, but it's very straightforward.
Give a summary.
Yeah, it's a
legalese.
Yeah,
we have fun with that, but I don't want to bore you with that.
But it's a person who, acts as a guardian for minors, mm-hmm. or as an adult with disabilities, or a conservator. They can be a conservator of the person. So if the person is having cognitive issues or physicality issues, we can be your conservator for that. We can also be conservators of the estate, which means we handle your finances. And so also we can be a personal representative after you pass away and leave the planet. And then a professional fiduciary also means a person who acts as a trustee. And so we can act as a trustee during life. Depending how your trust is worded, it can take effect during life or after you pass away. And we also can act as an agent under durable powers of attorney for healthcare, or an agent under a durable power of attorney for finance.
So hold on. So, summarizing it, at the beginning of this talk, we talked about those 4 basic estate documents. Right. And so fiduciaries are appropriately able to be named in those documents as someone who can act on behalf of the principal. Right. Okay.
Not only act, but also administer.
Right. Which is okay. And that is a good distinction. So, but in addition to the general scope of what a fiduciary is, in order to act in this capacity in California, not only there are other steps you got to go through, right? You're not just going to say, oh, I'm a fiduciary.
No.
You're licensed, right?
In fact, we have to, for licensing, we as applicants are required to, we have to disclose all our background history is looked up. We can't be convicted of any crimes at all, no bankruptcies, no breaches in fiduciary duties, maybe in other jobs or capacities. We have to complete 30 hours of, pre-licensing education. And that's in addition to the fact that you have to already have a bachelor's degree and experience in the field. And so we have to submit.
So your degree from law school, albeit you're not a lawyer, that's not a requirement for most fiduciaries.
No,
that's in addition.
Right. So I do have a bachelor's of science, but right. I also have the doctorate in law. Right. So that's very helpful to this field of work specifically. We have to submit our fingerprints to the Department of Justice.
Do they do a background check?
Yes, a criminal background check. Okay. And we also have to, we have to adhere to the Professional Fiduciaries Code of Ethics. And so that is a long laundry list. And many of the items on the list are very similar to what attorneys have to follow in terms of ethics as well.
Now, what about accounting? So should we talk about that a little bit? So do they, are there requirements regarding like once a fiduciary gets involved in a client's matter, what sort of things happen?
Well, I think, so under the probate codes, and whenever there's a new trustee, new fiduciary comes on the scene, that we have to marshal all your assets. Well, what does that mean? It means we need to take a very in-depth and accurate inventory of all your finances so that we know before we act on your behalf and in your best interest, what the baseline is. So we have to report this amount to the Department of Consumer Affairs every year. So if I have John Doe as a client, and let's say he has an estate of 3.5 million, I have to have a very extensive accounting performed. And while fiduciaries can perform these accountings, I usually farm that out because there are people who just are so good at it and can do it much more efficiently. And I always like to have another set of eyes as it checks and balances.
But that's like your own personal practice,
Yes.
Not necessarily
Right.
something that's regulated by the Department of Consumer Affairs.
No.
But maybe they should include that.
Maybe they should, but what the good news is that you are required to have this baseline accounting when you begin, and every year after. And usually to stay on top of it, I do them or have them done quarterly. And I can provide this information to anybody who my client wants, just to have additional oversight that we are accounting for every penny of our client's money.
Now, is there anything different with respect to, so that's sort of like general clients, but when we're talking about special needs types of clients or trusts?
Well, and to give just a little bit of context, a lot of parents who've worked very hard their whole life, they're happy to pass on a legacy to the next generation, but perhaps that child has either issues with spending habits, or they actually have some type of disability for which they're receiving government benefits. And so they don't want to jeopardize the government benefits. So they would come to you and you would draft up what's called a special needs trust, which would help supplement the needs they have due to their special station in life because of their disability. And I do administer special needs trusts. And so that becomes, where you can only make a distribution based on a specialty list of items so that you will never jeopardize the government benefits.
Well, and that's the big thing with special needs trust, right? That they're government benefit focused. So when you're doing that type of work as a fiduciary, how does that differ from the general type of trust we talked about in the beginning, which us lawyers call discretionary trusts?
Well, okay, so discretionary trusts continue into existence beyond the final distribution of a regular trust. And a discretionary trust is where you want somebody to administer these funds to this child in a way that will help sustain them through their life. And it's your discretion as a trustee how to give this child the money.
But we should back up. But from the client point of view, when they're structuring their discretionary trust, they can say they want their kids to get money I have some clients who say they want their kids to get everything, the whole pot at 18. Other clients who say 20% at 18, 20 at 25, and they keep going. So really it's the person's decision, how they set up that discretionary trust and what that money can be used for. And then the fiduciary is the one who would follow those express directives.
We wouldn't vary from the directions. And the discretion can be set by age. I've seen all kind of trusts where, in the extreme, sometimes children have to have a clean drug test. Some have to wait till a certain age, 30 years, 40 years. I've even seen 50 years. Sometimes it's a particular dollar amount per year. Other times it's for only particular expenditures like health, education, welfare, housing, and it's discretionary. And so what I like to do with those children and with the adult is have a really robust, honest discussion about administration.
Before it's in effect.
Before it's in effect. I can't emphasize the need
relationship
for
building.
communication.
And are there any, so obviously that ongoing relationship in general between a fiduciary and the client's family can be helpful. But in addition, are there any discretionary provisions that specifically can be even more helpful?
The discretionary provisions,
beyond the general.
well, as I said,
welfare.
especially a lot of times discretionary trusts are set up like for grandkids because they're, usually much younger. And again, it can be for education, for college education, or to start a business,
Right.
or to take a world trip.
Something of that.
So it really is as unique as the client and however they want to structure it.
Right.
You certainly give input advice as to what that would look like
For sure.
to
And
accomplish the goal.
yeah, exactly. And, I think I get the question a lot from clients as we talk about fiduciaries. They wonder about the cost of all this because, they hadn't thought about it as a service for themselves and their estate. So can you shed some light on how fiduciaries are compensated in general and what type of options there are?
Certainly I can. And so there's kind of two parts to that. I think it really is quite comforting and kind of a V8 moment when people realize, hey, you are going to need the services of a fiduciary.
Well, they're like, wait, I don't have to do it myself, or my kids don't have to do it.
Right.
I mean, the sense of relief was like, oh my gosh.
It's a huge relief of a burden, but more than that, just the realization that you're going to need the services of a fiduciary long before you leave the planet.
Right.
So it's better to really have some open and honest communication with the people you name on your documents. You got to make sure they're up for the task.
Right. And so if someone does name a fiduciary, do they get, I've heard about percentages of an estate is an appropriate fee versus, hourly arrangements, depending on the size. And, we serve clients here for all ranges. So, what does that look like when they sign on with a fiduciary?
Right. Well, sometimes, people would name banks as fiduciaries,
Right.
and that is very expensive. And it's not very human. What I mean is they're bankers and they're not going to have that relationship with the client and with the beneficiaries that hopefully a fiduciary can establish. So on the range of costs.
Well, and there can be benefits of that approach in some estate situations for sure. But as far as like cost, if someone's looking at, interviewing 10 different licensed fiduciaries and having them look at their estate, whether it's, estate that's worth $100,000 or 10 million,
right?
What does that?
Well, it's negotiable. It's absolutely negotiable.
Based on the
So, a lot of trusts will have like this generic language saying
reasonable compensation.
Reasonable compensation. So what does that even mean? Well, in case law, that's been determined to be 1%. So you could negotiate with your fiduciary to handle all your affairs for 1% of your estate.
Okay.
So, in a way, I mean, that's not that we aren't legally bound to be motivated to preserve your estate, but, the more successful you are, then the more successful a fiduciary could be under that scenario. But also, too, the rates range depending on what agency you're fulfilling. So
if it's not a percentage based,
then
can it be an hourly
Oh,
arrangement?
absolutely.
Okay.
So for
Based on
instance-
time work. So,
Yeah.
coming to meet with the family, looking at the finances, getting comfortable with the different brokerage
Arranging
accounts.
doctor's appointments or transportation or looking into health insurance issues.
Right.
So
right.
we call that senior care coordination, which is for your health. And so those are a little bit less expensive, and those most senior care coordinators charge about $90 an hour, and up to for very complicated tax issues and accountings and bill pay and all these types of things can go to $150 an hour. So Mary, to answer your question, the range is between $90 and $150 an hour. And that's very reasonable when you look at it compared to if someone like you,
and that happens too.
it does happen,
Right.
but also you kind of get the best of both worlds with the fiduciary, because if they reach any sticky spots or they're unsure, they will consult with an attorney and absolutely make sure that your best interests are being represented and the proper way to dealing with an estate or agency is occurring.
Right. And so, we talked a little bit before about protections in case, fiduciaries do get involved. And does the court approve, the fees, or, what happens with the accountings? I think you mentioned the accountings when a fiduciary is involved are submitted to somewhere. So,
well, they can be. So it depends. So I've often said that if someone names me as their power of attorney for healthcare and their power of attorney for business and finance, that equals a voluntary conservatorship.
Right.
Conservatorships happen involuntarily, meaning they're through the court, the judge and the doctors, and reviewing all the information and having a court referee.
That's like where that whole reference to the movie, I think a lot comes in.
That would have never happened in California because the court would have actually had a representative from the court speak to the potential conservatee. Okay. And it would be two physicians and there would be multiple meetings, and the court has an absolute preference to have family members be conservators. So everything in that movie was horribly portrayed. And so,
but so in California, there are protections because we have this administrative body, we have the ability for accountings.
But just to get back to answering your specific question about so if you are appointed by the court as a conservator, yes, you report all those accountings to the court. You cannot be paid one dime until the court approves your fees. However, if you've gone the voluntary route where somebody absolutely realizes, hey, I need help, or hey, I just want help because I can,
or I want help in the future because I'd like a fiduciary to project manage over my estate, right? So that does not have to be court.
No, but it still is under the probate code and has to be done at regular intervals, and still that should and can be reported to a trusted family member. I sometimes give those to the family attorney.
But from a structural point of view, what the attorneys can do is incorporate something called a trust protector. And that would force a third party who's getting involved in the estate to work, hand in hand with this trusted person. And some of my clients have named their CFAs, or their, trusted financial advisors.
And CFA stands for what, Mary?
Certified Financial Advisor.
Okay.
So they would have someone else who they trust in a financial context. And these are estates that, of a certain size where they're looking to do that. And then the fiduciary would be giving these accountings to that trusted advisor. Right. And there are other ways to work that in, like you can name a family member or, whoever it is.
We're all about checks and balances.
Exactly.
We want to make it absolutely accounted for in every way and be held accountable. And we will share this with the appropriate parties attorneys, CPAs, CFAs, or a designated family member that any client would want to have another look at the accounting to see exactly where all the amounts are going.
Well, and I think this is a good segue to kind of talk about fiduciaries in the context of, I kind of see them like general contractors over a project, and they can bring in the different subs. So in that context, like who do you bring in to help with an estate administration, or even before that, when someone needs additional care? Are we talking about care managers? Who are those people that you bring in?
Right. So just to kind of address what you said, it's like, it is like a general contractor. They're very well versed in all of the trades, and maybe at some point have performed a lot of them themselves. So they know what a good job looks like. They know what compliance with building code looks like. In the same way, a fiduciary is a traffic director and building a team of professionals unique to that client's needs. So, you know, we have drivers who can drive people to their doctor's appointments or to to run errands. We work closely with doctors and coordinating appointments. And we also work closely with a lot of caregiving agencies. Mm-hmm. So a lot of people, you know, they think I'm a caregiver. I'm like, no, I don't do the hands-on piece of it. But what I do is...
Well, let's pause on that.
Yes.
Because in California, this is like a geek out law moment here, but like caregivers have specific duties here. They're specifically regulated. There are definitions. I mean, there's all sorts of things. So no, fiduciaries are not caregivers.
No, we're not caregivers.
You can bring them on.
We bring them on as part of a complete team to make sure that all your needs are being met. So again, we it's better to have this professional management, because you don't want your neighbor giving you medication.
I know, you know, I had a client that was happening, and I was just like, wait, what's going on here? So, you know, why don't you want your neighbor giving you medication?
Well, because there's just so much liability. This is just an area that has to be
technically in California,
you can't, right? You can't. So when it comes to a point where a client can no longer, you know, properly give themselves the medication, you know, if they're sitting there and 5 minutes later, they're like, oh, did I take that pill? I can't remember. So then they take another. You know, there's situations where you want to have someone intervening, making sure you're getting your correct dosages. If you run out, that you're getting refills immediately. And so we have dispensing nurses who provide these types of services.
Which would be the appropriate professional sub to bring in for that job.
Right.
So I guess in all, that's kind of how the fiduciaries in general can work in the client's best interest, right? And I hear that a lot. So
yeah, well, we are...
Can we talk about that?
Well, I mean, you have to have a passion for it. This is not something that you can just do for the money, because you do work intimately with your clients. And you really do develop a rapport, and they trust you. And because of the trust that is instilled in us by the nature of being a fiduciary, but also with the oversight and the licensing, we have to work in the best interest of the client. And one of those situations that is a reoccurring theme, Mary, is most people would like to stay in their own home. But sometimes it becomes, you know, not efficient and not effective to do that from a monetary standpoint. But
well, and also from a care standpoint, where you go from certain levels of affordability and what the actual cost of 24 hours of care is.
24 hours of care is $24,000 a month on average. And that's unless you have like a long-term care policy, it might not be possible. But
those don't even cover everything.
No, so, they don't. But you know, we do try to work with we are mandated to work with the least restrictive environment.
What does that mean exactly? So that means if, you know, I can't, you know, afford in-home care 24 hours a day, what would my least restrictive environment option be?
Well, if you have long-term care and depending, and that's the thing, one of the professionals that I bring in is somebody to assess what your level of care is.
Okay.
You know, and it's usually kind of graduated. And we start out, you know, trying to adhere to that least restrictive environment. If you want to be in your home, you know where everything is, you feel comfortable, you feel confident.
Right.
But, you know, sometimes there's things that we can do to help with the budgetary constraints.
So let's pause on the budgetary constraints. So something that, you know, is possible with when someone hires a fiduciary is they do that initial triage and find out what the assets are, and then forecast the budgetary needs and the models for being in home versus somewhere else, right? So
absolutely.
and it's an
obviously
analysis.
The best.
I mean, I've seen those charts. I don't know if you all have.
The best outcome possible is that you will not outlive your money.
Right. Exactly.
And to that extent, you know, we get in there, we take a look, we calculate the person's age, we calculate their needs, and we see what we can do, and we try to be creative to stretching that budget.
But Beth, the fiduciary is more the one who's looking at that, but not a financial advisor who could say, hey, look, your care needs are 10, 20 years down the line. Let's build this pot of money so you have more. So like that's where a fiduciary could help get a client perhaps, you know, in contact with a solid financial advisor.
Right,
so
or work with their current advisor to start doing some regular planning.
Yeah,
it's so key. You can't just let these things set and hope everything's okay. You know, one example, I had a 90-year-old client, and the investment manager had her at a 5 risk level. Now, for those of you who are not familiar, risk level goes 1 to 5, with 5 being the most aggressive. So, you know, she would not be able to recover if her investments did not do well. We had a set budget.
And she was
90 years old. And she had plenty of assets to sustain her to the rest of her life, but we needed to protect those assets.
Oh, yeah.
So for her, it was appropriate to go down in her level of risk. For other people, depending on their age and their goals, it might be appropriate to go the other way. However, we do try to utilize your existing team. If you're happy with them and they're getting you the results you deserve, then they get to stay.
And that's great. But I think it comes down to, you know, having more eyes on folks' situations and eyes that they want on it, right? So,
right.
You know.
So we've been really successful with, you know, getting roommates who can do housing in exchange for caregiving, doing reverse mortgages. So we really do try to come up with the least restrictive environment and, you know, figure out a plan for the future to help the client live their best life.
Well, and that's the thing, right? So helping a client live their best life is, how does a fiduciary do that, starting with the intake process? Like, what does that look like?
Well, as you already mentioned, Mary, we, you know, I extensively survey.
So the meeting. There's
the meeting. I get to know them because you know what? It's got to be a fit. You're going to be in this person's life, and it can feel invasive at first. And you really have to be respectful of the hard work that they put into their life to get to the point where they're at. And they have to get a really good feel for you, just like you would interview a realtor or a car mechanic or any number of professional services that you provide. It has to be a fit. So if it's a fit and you feel comfortable with one another, you would, you know, very gratefully ask to survey their assets and expenses, and then you would go about making these forecasts on where they want to live, where, you know, and then
like what we were talking about.
Right, it's all based on age and life expectancy and actuary charts, and so, you know, one of the things that I've noticed with the clients is that once they get past needing, like for instance, 8 hours of in-home caregiving.
And that's kind of a threshold.
That's a
that people in
threshold.
the industry talk about.
It's a rule of
So
thumb.
right.
So if you have a client who's kind of at that 8-hour threshold, and whether that's 4 hours in the morning, 4 hours in the afternoon, 8 hours within a 24-hour period of care, it's actually more economical to be at an assisted living facility. And I know we all kind of, it's been stigmatized that somehow if your loved one ends up in a, one of those types of communities that you failed. But I've had a lot of my clients actually thrive for the social aspects, the activities, and plus the benefit of they get 24-hour care for the same price as 8-hour care in their home.
So I think that, that is a consideration. But again, it's all about empowering the person, right? And so to have these conversations at a point when they're, they want to be advised about it it serves their interest, right? Versus having it thrust upon them in the throes of making these life-altering decisions sometimes.
Well, that's why we have, us fiduciaries have 2 ears and one mouth. We have got to listen to what the client wants. And a lot of times I do mediation with family members who really have very strong opinions about what they think their parents should be doing or how they should be spending their money. And I'm the one holding the line.
Well, and to show the charts and share that information should the client want that or the principal want it shared, right? I mean, because oftentimes I bet there's a situation too where, the client doesn't want that information shared with the family members.
And you have to respect that.
Yeah, but it's important
100%.
to set the framework for that. So we're getting close to the end of time here, and I want to make sure there's a little bit of time for questions. If anyone has them, you can start putting them in the chat. But do you have any other general tips, Lori Beth, other than what we talked about? And of course, having your estate plan is my general tip to everyone.
Of course, to avoid having a stranger or the court step in if you lose capacity.
Right.
You need to communicate with the person who you wish to name on your documents to make sure they're up for the task. And unfortunately, most people are not. They don't consider it the great honor that you do. It really is quite interferes with their life. And even if you insist on having a friend or family member as the first person's named on your documents, at least consider having a professional fiduciary as a backup so that if they do decline, and you may not know this because this may be on your trust or your will, but if they do decline, that you have somebody at the ready to step in immediately.
Well, and or a process described other than going to the court and having it approved. I mean, right now we're in the age of court delay, so that's usually not beneficial for most scenarios. But I think that's it. Like if you want to have your trusted friend involved, maybe have them as someone that a fiduciary reports to, or as a trust protector or something like that.
Yeah.
I mean, there's so many
I think
awesome
those checks
solutions.
and balances are really good because unfortunately, Mary, I am a member of the FAST team.
Oh, right. What does that stand for again? It's financial abuse
Specialist,
right?
Yeah, and so we deal with unfortunately victims who've been the victim of financial abuse. And who is doing the abusing? The friend, the friend of the family, and family members, and to a lesser degree,
or the
unlicensed caregivers who are not through an agency, but people who you just found who are willing to care for you.
Well, let's not make this a fear-based presentation though, because really we're all about solutions and serving the client's interest and getting, and this whole point of this presentation is to be informative, right? So the ways to prevent having your estate before the FAST team is to make sure that you are totally confident in your team and you've got checks and balances, right? And so if you want to consider having a fiduciary as part of your team, definitely talk to your attorney about it. Make sure you understand it. This, of course, is informational, so there's no attorney-client relationship, affected here through this. But if you wanted to find a list, is there like a list of professionally licensed fiduciaries in California?
Yeah, there are. There's two different ways you can find licensed fiduciary. You can go to the Department of Consumer Affairs in the fiduciary search and find fiduciaries that way.
Mm-hmm.
But another marvelous organization, which has meetings all the time, so we're always up to date and continuing education, is called the Professional Fiduciaries of California.
But that has an acronym. I hear it all the time.
PFAC. It's
PFAC,
Professional
right.
Fiduciary
Yes.
Association of California.
Right.
And you can actually look them up
Mm-hmm.
by county, and
Mm-hmm.
you can interview them. We're always happy to talk to people on the phone, and it's okay. Shop around, find the fiduciary that you feel has the experience in your specific needs and can address your concerns.
But don't sign anything until your lawyer reviews it.
Yeah.
I mean, you're trusted as, family advisor, because,
Right.
you want to have other eyes on that too.
Right.
Why
But
not,
I really like what you said, Mary. It truly is a team effort.
Right.
And you want checks and balances.
Mhm.
And that's why it's a beautiful thing, because a fiduciary is a very economical way to get a very specialized professional.
Yeah, as part of your team. So with that, now that we have just demystified fiduciaries, does anyone have any questions? I think you all, Karen, you guys are all muted. If you have questions, you're more than welcome to ask, or email is fine too.
No, I thought it was great. We aren't at that stage yet, and working on, now that my mother-in-law has passed, setting our own finances in order, and realize that, as sort of the person, because I was a math major, I love spreadsheets, whatever, I took on the task of, here's an asset spreadsheet, here's where all her money is, and here's her monthly budgets, here's the expenses, etc., and sent it to all 4 of her children. And I did all that as a volunteer because she's family. She was my mother-in-law. We moved out here and helped take care of her. So I just did that, and I was partially retired. So, I could just do that. What I'm realizing is that if I had charged for some of that time, coordinating her doctor's appointments and doing all those things,
It's so much, right?
Healthy part-time job, but it's family. So
Right.
Is there a place where I could get licensed as that, since I really sort of enjoyed doing what I did?
Oh yeah, actually.
Right. So
Reach out to Lori Beth. She'll guide you through.
Yeah. So I myself have gone through a program through UC Riverside. They have a fiduciary program, and I would like to point out some of the things. Karen, you said you're a math major. This is a highly technical thing to be a well-rounded fiduciary. And again, just like attorneys, fiduciaries can specialize. So you may have a fiduciary who is more on the power of attorney for healthcare end. That's their jam. Or someone who's much more math, has an affinity for math. The best is someone who is a people person and a numbers person, such as myself. And so there's a lot of education that goes through it. When you go through the entire program, it's pretty much like a master's degree. And then you have to sit and take a licensing test, both for California and nationally. And so, and as we already mentioned, the background check, which, you've already done that. But yeah, I really appreciate you underscoring the fact that, it's a lot of number crunching and tracking and tracing.
Mm-hmm.
And also the fact that you were probably only able to do it because you were semi-retired, and this became your other part-time job. So there was
job.
quite a bit involved with it.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, thank you.
Yes.
Need to get on to lunch and things, but I appreciate all of the information. And a lot of it is a reminder. It's like, yeah, got there. Thank you.
Anyone else have any questions? No, okay. Well, thank you guys so much for showing up today and for wanting to learn about fiduciaries. If you have any other questions, you can reach out to me. I'm Mary at hvplawoffices.com. My office is right by Bass Bakery on the plaza. I'm happy to talk about this type of thing with anyone. And Lori Beth is with Paladin Fiduciary Services. Hope you guys have a really great day. Bye.
Hi, thank you for your wonderful expose.
Oh.
You were very well prepared and very eloquent. Thank you so much.
So
But after all, it's complicated.
it is complicated. I hope it was a little less. Do you have any other questions I can answer?
No, then I know where to find you. It was a good.
Excellent.
Yeah,
Thank
we're
you.
here.
Thank
We're
you.
here. Come
Enjoy
anytime.
your day, yeah?
You too. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.